Hello, everyone. My name is Irfan Asariwala, your host, and welcome to another episode of Irfan's Crystal Ball. Today, we have a very special episode as I am joined by veteran sports journalist and executive director for the Center of Sports Media at Seton Hall, BJ Schecter, to discuss everything March Madness. Hello, BJ. Thank you very much for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Irfan.
To begin with, I just wanted to ask the question that everyone kind of wants to know. Who do you think is going to win this tournament this year?
Well, it's the million-dollar question, right? You look at you look at the season as a whole in the field, and the SEC got 14 teams in, which is by far a record. So you have to look at the top teams in the SEC, and by the top teams, there are really four that stick out. It's Auburn, which is the number one overall seed; Florida, which won the SEC tournament. Then Alabama, which ended the season on a little bit of slide, as did Auburn, um, but um, but went to the Final Four last year. In Tennessee, that's the other SEC team that is really dangerous, really athletic. Night in and night out, the SEC was a war. There were no easy games. And so I think you have to take a hard look at the top teams in the SEC. I see, as I look at the bracket, some of the mid to the bottom tier. It's hard to call the SEC bottom tier, but the lower ranked teams in the SEC, and I'm thinking of a Missouri or an Ole Miss or a Mississippi State. Um, you know, I, I think could be in danger of an upset. Missouri, in particular, has a really tough first round matchup. And just looking at the bracket, I would say, I think they're probably the SEC team that is most likely on upset alert. Early on, they play Drake out of the Missouri Valley Conference. Missouri is a 6 seed, Drake's an 11. Drake is a very dangerous team.
Yeah, we've obviously seen that Drake has been able to make those runs the last few years. Last year, they made it deep into the tournament. You look at a team like Arkansas, who's playing the 7 seed of Kansas. Do you think Arkansas has a chance to upset Kansas, or do you think the Blue Bloods kind of continue their run?
Yeah, I mean, I think you look at these first round games, top to bottom, and they're not a lot of gimmies. I think you're going to see lots of double digit seeds um, win. For example, I like Yale as a 13 seed to potentially upset Texas A&M, another SEC team. But in terms of Arkansas and Kansas, um, Kansas has really had a very up and down year. They were the preseason number one team in the country, and for a period towards the latter part of the season, fell out of the top 25. So this is a Kansas team that struggled. Um, Arkansas had a scrap and claw to even get into the tournament. They were a bubble team for the last 2, 3 weeks of the season, and so they were in must-win games week in and week out. It's a very winnable game for Arkansas. I still like Kansas, but would it surprise me if Arkansas pulled that one out? Not at all.
Yeah, absolutely. And then looking at another kind of, like you said, none of the matchups are really give me's. What about Maryland versus Grand Canyon? That is a Maryland team that is coming off some brutal losses, especially to end the season, where it was just the last possession of the games that they were losing. How do you see Maryland kind of going up against a team like Grand Canyon?
Yeah, I don't think Maryland's going to struggle against Grand Canyon. Maryland has been snake bitten all year. I think they lost 4 games at the buzzer, which is pretty amazing. Um, More than half their losses were at the buzzer. Maryland has as talented a starting five as any team in the nation. Their starting five is extremely talented. All five starters average double digits, um, and points. I think where Maryland is going to run into trouble as they get deeper into the tournament, they don't have a bench. They went through several games this season where they got literal or no production out of their bench. So if they get into foul trouble, they get injuries, they get tired. I think they're going to struggle. But I like Maryland to beat Grand Canyon in the first round.
Yeah, and sticking kind of with that, the bench is obviously going to be a crucial point, not only with wear and tear, but then injuries as well. Missouri ranked third in the nation this past year for bench points per game, going back to your point of them possibly being able to make a deep run. But another team that was top 10 in bench points per game this year was Michigan State. Michigan State always in the tournament, always make a deep run. What do you see out of Michigan State this year, especially being a two seed?
Yeah, I mean, this is a very dangerous Michigan State team because they don't have that dominant scorer, um, that inside presence per se. They're just a really good team. They play extremely hard, as most Tom Izzo teams do. They can score the ball at just about every position. And they're just tough. Tom Izzo has had a knack over the years of scheduling really difficult in the non-conference season, and I think he's kind of eased up on that a little bit just because um, in past years, Michigan State was so battle scarred by the time they got to the tournament that they couldn't make a deep run. This is a Michigan State team, regular season Big Ten champs by 2 games in a very tough conference that I think can make a deep run. I like Michigan State to go to the Final Four. They're in the same bracket as Auburn in the South. I like Michigan State's matchup all the way through. When you look at the bracket, they start off with Bryant, potential second round game with Marquette. Um, and then I think probably Iowa State. And if they get that far, they would see Auburn. So not an easy road, for sure, but definitely a doable road for what's been a terrific Spartans team so far this season.
Sticking with that, which one seed do you think has the easiest path to the Final Four?
I would say Houston, out of the Midwest. Um, Either Houston or Duke. Duke in the East. Um, I would say Alabama, which went to the Final Four, as we mentioned earlier, last year, and has looked great at times, kind of limped into the tournament. Did not have a very good end to the regular season, not a great SEC tournament. Um, and so I think as 2 seeds go, they may be the weakest of the twos. Um, and then when you look at the bracket in the East, Wisconsin's a 3, Arizona's 4. Um, but Houston, I like Houston's path. Um, Tennessee is the 2 in the Midwest. Kentucky is the 3. So there's the SEC again. Purdue is the four. I think Purdue is by far the weakest four seed. I like Houston's athleticism. I like how they pressure the ball, they force mistakes. I think Kelvin Sampson's style in the tournament is going to give opposing teams a lot of problems.
Yeah, not only that, they have plenty of experiments like a team like Michigan State. They're in this tournament every year, so they know how to face that adversity as well. Speaking of a team that's always in the tournament, the last two championships have gone to UConn. UConn's an 8 seed this year. They're nowhere near as good as they've been the past few years. How far of a run do you think they can make, and do you even think they can survive the first round?
Well, I mean, those 8-9 games are just toss-ups. That's the game you don't want to be in. I feel, I feel terrible for those 8-9 seeds. And it's a toss-up. So they get Oklahoma in the first round. I like UConn to beat Oklahoma. I think they match up really well. Yeah, they can shoot, have good guards, and a guy like Alex Caravan and that has tournament experience. I think they'll come to play, and they played a lot better the last third of the season, and really showed sparks of being a really good team. But assuming they do beat Oklahoma, they're going to see Florida, and I don't like that matchup for UConn. I think Florida. I think Florida will win that game easily.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, like you said, Florida's just been so dominant all year, all long, especially within such a loaded group in the SEC with Ole Miss, Missouri, Arkansas, Tennessee, um, Auburn as well. It's just been such a competitive division. I think they've had those games where they've learned, especially how to win those tight games, and that'll help them in a matchup with a team like UConn. One other game that I really want to highlight is the Michigan UC San Diego game. Michigan as a 5 seed and UC San Diego is their first ever tournament ticket that they've got this year. How do you see that game? And do you think UC San Diego has a chance to make it past this round into the Sweet 16?
I don't see Michigan losing this game. When you look at the history of the tournament, a 12 beats a 5 every year. So there will be a 12 that beats a 5. I don't see UC San Diego as that 12 seed that's going to advance. Um, Tournament experience, the bright lights of the NCAA tournament, uh, Michigan, really good team, Big Ten tournament champion, in what I would consider the second best conference behind the SEC. I think the Big Ten unquestionably was second. A lot of good teams in the Big Ten, a lot of wars night in and night out. I think Michigan has got the size and athleticism to overwhelm UC San Diego. So um, I don't see that being one of the 12 that beats a 5 this year.
You look at a team like St. John's. How do they stack up for you? And do you think that they will also be able to make it with a deep run, especially if they have to face teams like Kansas and Texas Tech early on?
I like, yeah, I mean, I like St. John's to on my bracket to advance to the Elite Eight. Um, Rick Pitino is a proven winner. Whatever magic he's sprinkling on his teams in year two, if you look at going back to his first head coaching job at BU, Boston University, uh, to Providence, to Kentucky, to Louisville, Iona, and now St. John's. the from year one to year two is just it's been incredible. And St. John's won the Big East regular season. They have good size. They're really athletic. Kadari Richmond, RJ Lewis. St. John's is going to struggle in what's seen is they're a terrible three-point shooting team. They do not shoot the three well. They don't have down three-point shooter. So in the tournament, you have to be able to shoot. You have to be able to knock down the three, especially when teams will start to play zone. Will start to clog the middle so you can't penetrate. St. John's is I probably watched St. John's play 12 or 13 times this year, including several times in person. Um, I like this team a lot. I like Rick Pitino. The lack of shooting scares me.
And you talked about obviously the lack or the importance of the 3-point ball in the March Madness tournament. You look at a team like BYU who ranked sixth in the nation for, excuse me, 10th in the nation for 3-pointers per game. How do you see a team like BYU stacking up, especially as a six seed?
Yeah, I mean, I think BYU can score. Um, they score a lot of points. They get up and down the floor. Um, but when you look at, they got a really tough draw. I picked BYU to win their first round game against VCU, but they could easily lose that game. VCU is a high scoring team. They'll get up and down the floor. They'll turn you over. Um, the first one to 100 wins in that first round matchup. Uh, should they win that game, which I think they will, they get Wisconsin. Um, Wisconsin has had a terrific year. Again, really tough matchup. Should they win that game, they would probably get Alabama. Um, and then if by some miracle they won that game, they would likely get Duke. So I think the road when you look at the NCAA tournament, it's really about matchups and the matchup and the draw, and you look at BYU in the East and from their first round game, and then you play it out to every single round. It's a tough matchup. It's a hard road to have a long, deep run for BYU. So I just don't see it.
With that said, the last and final question I have for you is what team do you think will make the Cinderella run this year?
Um, I think we mentioned Drake out of the Missouri Valley Conference. I like Drake a lot. Another team that I think can make a Sweet 16 type a run is Yale out of the Ivy League. James Jones has is proven that they can win tournament games. I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago they got to the Sweet 16. So that's a team that I look to. And then if every year we have to pick, there's going to be one high double digit seed that's going to advance. You win that first game, that second game becomes a lot easier. I wasn't so bold to pick a 15 over a 2 or a 16 over a 1 this year. But I am picking UNC Wilmington out of the CAA, the Colonial Conference, to upset the Texas Tech in the first round. I know Texas Tech has got some injuries. UNC Wilmington's got nothing to lose playing with house money. I think that could potentially be the upset that everybody's talking about in the first round.
Yeah, that would be an absolute shocker to the entire college basketball world. But in reality, I don't think it's too far fetched. I think that is certainly a possibility that could happen. And then, especially if they have to go against a team like Drake, if Drake is able to upset Missouri, that could make for a really interesting second round game between Drake and then UNC Wilmington.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, BJ. I really appreciate you coming on and joining me for this episode and giving all your insights into March Madness. We appreciate you and hope to have you again in the future.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Take care. Bye bye.